Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining this webinar series hosted by ITHENA in partnership with a lot of our ecosystem partners. We want to welcome you this morning, and we'll get started just in a minute as soon as I get a go-ahead from my host. Okay, super. Well, thank you again, everybody, for joining as folks are coming in. I have the green light to get started. My name is Prabodh Chiplunkar, and I'm the CEO and founder of ITHENA. Along with our team, we've put together a webinar that talks a lot about how organizations, especially in the manufacturing industry, are looking at becoming more resilient, sustainable by improving their factory reliability index and moving towards the journey of world-class manufacturing. And to set the context, there's going to be a Q&A toward the end of the webinar. So I would appreciate if folks can share their Q&A in the chat that's provided to them or in the Q&A box that's provided as part of the webinar link. And two, if you don't mind holding your questions till the end of the webinar, we would have an opportunity to go through them one by one and be able to answer all of them. There's a few other hosts with me, Mr. VP Kailkar, who's our VP of Digital Manufacturing and Solutions in our office here in Richmond, Virginia. So with that, I'm going to get started just about the topic of entering into the world-class manufacturing realm through improvement of your factory reliability index. Now, there's some buzzwords here which I want to demystify a little bit as we get started. WCM and the best practices, as it's known to mankind for many years, nothing new that we're inventing, but we want to set the context of what that means. How have we used the reliability index as a measure of success of how well are you on the path and roadway to achieving world-class manufacturing? What are some of the solutions that can help you improve that index? And what are the tenets of that measurement that you have to take? And of course, Q&A toward the end. So let me set the context a little bit. We've all heard of world-class manufacturing in different contexts. Organizations, especially a lot in the automotive, as well as folks that are deployed, leading manufacturers like Fiat, Chrysler, Tetra Pak, they use WCM as a system of organization of production. So kind of the state-of-the-art capabilities across process, technology, organization that can really help them become producers of almost zero defect, zero incident, waste stock capabilities to improve efficiencies in the industrial process. So they do that by eliminating waste and loss through commitments of various levels of the organization and the best use of practices that are deployed globally. Of course, in thriving to be on the journey of world-class manufacturing, you also have some techniques that have been deployed, again, for many years. So I'm really just iterating what you might have heard in the past, which is either lean manufacturing, TPM, the concepts of Six or Lean Sigma, Kaizen events that organizations initiate, Kanban, more of operative management capacities of how do you put priorities on boards and things of that nature. All of those techniques, but also integrated with systems that are systems of inventory, systems of finance, cost of goods management, which is kind of your ERP, your MES, which is your core operational system on the shop floor, JIT type tools, just-in-time type tools, both for inventory or for production management. QMS, mostly looking at quality and areas of improvement and management of the baseline of your product output. TPM, obviously for productive maintenance to optimize equipment availability and performance, and making sure that each member is doing their part to reduce waste. CMMS systems that are in place, which is to enable a lot of the maintenance and management of your infrastructure processes that require you to be deploying the best class facilities. And of course, this new age that we've inserted in here, technological advancement in customer experience or customer service, augmented reality, data and analytics, of course, they've now become kind of table stakes, but also use of artificial intelligence or machine learned throughput that can be easily used in these systems of records. And I say that to showcase that the maturity of this FRI that we're going to talk about, while it's across your business systems, your operational systems, it's also across what maturity level you have in your IT systems as they apply to the shop floor. And that's where these 3-4 buckets will come through. What I want to also level set is something you might have seen before or maybe talked about for sure, and everybody has their own method of assessing this. But it's the inside the plant view. If I'm a general manager or COO or president of a manufacturing unit or facility or business, I'm looking to be obviously smarter and connected, kind of they go hand in hand. And then obviously for safe operations, how do I run a smart manufacturing roadmap, more leading towards like a lights out operation, meaning can I have systems in place that are sans or at least less dependent on people necessarily, and a lot more dependent on processes and automations that can take my production quality high, the ability for scale easy, and allow me to use my reach to the customers much better by always being on time and in full in terms of my delivery of goods. So in that, you look at the various core data sets that exist. Certainly your 5 M's or whatever number of M's there might be on the shop floor, the machines, manpower, methods, measurements, material, Mother Nature, and the components that primarily generate data. From there has to be a set of methods that are deployed to ensure that the data that's exuded or collected through these systems is properly dispersed and utilized. Not just for becoming good at storing and utilizing data, but actually coming up with the results of better efficiency, near zero defect manufacturing, ensuring that work instructions are not in minds of people, but are documented across, making sure we have traceability and genealogy across various components of your business, of your entire factory, down to a line, down to a machine, down to a job as you deploy your applications. Again, this isn't something that we're coming up with here at ITHENA. This is something that we have obviously seen in a lot of the deployments that our customers do and help them achieve these areas of improvement in productivity or compliance and quality. The question that I asked our team saying, why this webinar now? So the reason of now is what I wanted to share with this group. A lot of customers and prospects that we work with have, of course, IT departments and a technology storm that's kind of waiting, or that they've heard of, or maybe they're part of at times. And so the adoption or the components of IT and the various methods that exist and tools and technology that exist on the IT side are very relevant on the OT side as well. And we've talked about IT, OT coming together, but it's really the secure and scalable integration and adoption of such components that exist on each side. That's really creating the need for us to do world-class manufacturing and measure it through some index like the reliability of your factory. I don't want to walk through each one necessarily, but it's important that you might see, well, am I adopting to wearable technology? Am I maximizing my serviceability or maintenance if I'm running on the factory and if I'm deploying product outside? Or is it a finished good product that's a consumable or something like that? Then you've got other areas of compliance and governance of and experience. But if you're deploying if you're a machine tool builder and an OEM, you're sending your equipment to other manufacturers to manufacture their goods. How are you managing service there? How are you looking at ability to do spare parts management? Of course, again, if you're an end user, you've got different components of inventory and work orders and things that you do within your CMMS. But if you are an OEM, you want to become one with e-commerce capability to your end customer. Well, that can be part of world-class manufacturing because that's one tenet of your function or operations. But how are you achieving that, and where do you stand in that? What tools and technologies are available for you to get to that point of deploying the world-class manufacturing journey? So while we've defined what we feel that companies look at both business and technologically as the key component to achieve world-class manufacturing, we have chosen the approach of FRI, and hence this obviously webinar today, as to what that is in terms of our understanding of the FRI approach that ITHENA has kind of a little bit crafted, if I may, which is that to utilize the maturity of your factory reliability across processes, both operational and business supporting processes, technology that's both related to operations technology as well as IT, and organization, whether it's your ops people that are running the shop floor, whether it's middle management, whether it's executive management, whether it's sales force that's outside helping promote. How do you stay connected, and what's that organizational impetus that you have to have, and what that reliability is of that entire business process to determine where do you stand on the roadmap to world-class manufacturing. So having said that, let's now dive into our second point, again, defining what WCM is and what it means, what FRI process that we have assessed and identified, what is that approach to improve that FRI, and the higher the reliability index, the better on the journey of WCM you would be. It's kind of almost like you're in the consumer space, almost like your credit score. You get one credit score that's over 750 or what have you, and then you have a lot more capability to be called an individual that has better purchasing power, better ability to get credit, etc. Now, to achieve that good score, obviously there's many things that go on, and not just one and done, but several processes that have to continue for many years and months on end. But it all starts as it relates to the business. I take that analogy to come back to our industry, which is, what is the strategic charter from a manufacturing perspective? And I'll walk through one slide on that very specifically. What is it that you want to improve and build on? But assuming you've defined a strategic charter that is conducive to your business growth, understanding the tenets of WCM that you want to then embark on, because you cannot take all initiatives at all times. And once you've identified those initiatives, you still cannot run each one unless you understand the current maturity. And this is where kind of we look at what FRI stands for, which is determining through various processes, technologies, and organization internally as to where you stand, what programs based on your current maturity and your want to be state can you take on to go on to the next level of world-class manufacturing. What kind of impediments might there be, and what kind of solutions and techniques there might be for you to utilize those for the betterment and your growth in that space. And of course, how are you going to execute that organizational change? Because having a lot of these buzzwords and technical tools available to you and your workforce can not only create excitement at one end, which is great, but also can create a little bit of confusion as to which one to use, when to use which one, how do you train people to stay afloat, and how do you deploy things that are more myopic or very specific to the function or persona of the individual using it, rather than the art of the possible. So what we've done at ITHENA is really help bring the 50,000 foot view down to usable and bite-sized opportunities for us to be able to take that roadmap to reality with the assessment of FRI and improvement of that eventually to achieve world-class manufacturing. So I talked a little bit about this component right here, the strategic charter, and that really is the kickoff or determinant of what else do you end up doing. And I'll give you an example, and this is a slide from my past life that we have looked at. A strategic charter can be as much as in your operation space that you want to do better product design, you want to better integrate disparate systems of data from an engineering, from design, from manufacturing, core process of operations alone. That actually the green box, it states in the way it's showcased, it actually allows you to maximize profitability because maybe you're not doing something newer, you're just doing it better. So that cognizance is important. Whereas the ability then now for you to go do asset performance management or build connected products that get deployed with your customer, whether it's wearables by, say, an Apple Watch is a connected product. So is a glucose monitoring device. So is an EV charger, because they're all products that are deployed in the field or used by somebody else, but the manufacturer can possibly have some input or insight into how that product is working, should that information be shared. And in our industrial context, further important to understand what that ecosystem is and how OEMs, for example, can monitor their fleet or assets deployed at customer locations. And last but not the least, of course, are you looking to change business models through different channels? There was a company that provides a company that has moved from providing just tires to a tier one or a OEM in the automotive manufacturing space to providing mileage or tires as a service rather than providing tires for a few $100s each as part of the bill of materials for the car. While that comes out as an important element of the BOM that the car is manufactured with, it also eventually has changed the business model in this new age to say, hey, I'm not going to sell the tire alone. I'm going to actually sell the service that goes with it, and I'll give you the tire for free or up to a certain amount of time. It's on us, etc. So but for that they need to then stay more connected with the customer, more connected with the usage of that tire, which is today mostly the OEM or the dealer is who then is closer to all of that. But looking at innovative ways to change that business model is one charter that you could have for world-class manufacturing. Now, we focus specifically in this webinar about the green stuff at the bottom primarily, and maybe some of the gray stuff. But what's important is that you identify what is that business or strategic charter that you want to be tied to initiate the world-class manufacturing efforts, which then will determine which elements of your reliability should you be measuring the most and where they stand for you to achieve that WCN. So understanding the maturity, as I mentioned, there's a couple of different tenets to it. One, it's the core operations, what happens on the shop floor, whether it's inventory coming in from raw material to out the door logistics. All of that within your planning, manufacturing, maintenance, logistics, all of that goes under operations. Then there's surround functions of environment, health, and safety, governance, and other components of training related to HR, sustainability initiatives, uh, finance, HR, and other systems that are more important, and how mature are they from the reliability perspective. And both of these being functions of business, one for core manufacturing, other more for surround capability for you to be successful. They have to be integrated with whatever process you might have today. Albeit you might have a manual process, and that's your or a best of breed hybrid process, or you have something that's more of a very well integrated process from a systems perspective. So whichever approach you're taking and wherever it measures, it's important for you to have that determination up front. The way we kind of take these to practice, if I may, is that you build something around the maturity with a little bit more depth. So if I kind of double click on the operations side, you look at planning and look at sub processes like how are you doing production plans today? How are you doing scheduling today? How are you doing management of your production and your quality? How are you managing time, entry, and material? Are you doing any track and trace from core operations, either through an MES or through an industrial IoT platform? How are you doing your breakdowns and predictive or preventive or scheduled maintenance? How are work instructions being communicated or managed by your team today? The personnel training and accreditation, how are you managing that? Now, I'm not listed all the blocks that are important, but these are kind of the examples of things under each of these areas of sub-functions important for the success of the plant. And what FRI approach that we've taken is, of course, pretty straightforward if you think of any assessment. But to come up with a reliability index, you have to have very specific areas that we focus on to first assess and baseline, rationalize vis-a-vis the maturity you have versus the expectation of where you want to go, and then prioritize which initiatives need to come out. And you'll see an example just coming up in a few minutes about how that ties in together. But the eventuality of all of this is you come up with maturity level 1 all the way to, say, maturity level 3. And there's different nuances of what each of those levels do. More very manual and person-based, and then systems-based. So if I kind of look at what that looks like in the world of planning as an example, and we won't double click on each one, but we'll show you 2 or 3 such examples of how we help assess the reliability index so that you can determine, hey, am I on a scale of 1 to 3? And sometimes we take 1 to 5, but primarily, 3 is a good bucket to put most of processes, people, and technical advancement of companies into. 1 being very person-based, maturity 2 being a little bit more paper-based, maybe some technology, and 3rd is more system-based as we grow. We've helped organizations obviously go from M1 to M3, and you'll see some examples. But if I were to take planning and scheduling as very simplistically 2 functions on the shop floor or in the factory, you're completely paper-based, or it's verbal, or it's whiteboard-driven in the kind of the first scenario. If I were to have a maturity of M1 in this space, all the way to possibly becoming system-based, which is more dynamic planning. I take into account a lot of the changes in real time with my inventory. I look at my schedules of job and orders of sales that have come in and dynamically plan, even midday, possibly, or for sure midweek as your operations may demand, depends on what kind of schedule and process of manufacturing you adapt to. And scheduling synchronized with planning. Sometimes, a lot of times, it's independent, and then they come together only to know that there's a problem. But to be able to identify that, you must have technological advancement, and then we assess where that stands, where that advancement is. Do you have, integration with ERP? Is it templatized? Is it modular yet deployable with harmony? Is it centralized, or is it bespoke across various plants? So the important thing, kind of take away from here, is that there's 3 levels that we've identified as maturity, M3 being the best, M1 being the least. And then for each such sub-process of business, in this case planning, we give some examples of what they are. And there's many bullets in here. I'm giving you a little bit more of a maybe 25,000 foot view. And then for that, what the maturity of a business process or unison with technology should you have internally to be successful. If you take a similar approach for execution, and this could be a loaded slide a little bit, so I'm not going to walk through each one, but you look at how do you manage your execution of the shop floor, and is it digitized? How are you doing your daily stand-ups? How are you monitoring the performance of your equipment? How are you doing reporting of conformance, or you do non-conformance reporting? How are you doing your accreditation of resources and operators that are meant to be using the various equipment? How are you managing your handover, checkover lists, or even inspection lists? How you're integrating that with personnel as well as systems, or are you? What's important is that, are you envisioning yourself to be, first of all, assuming this is the most mature factory, let's say, are you envisioning these systems in place, and are they too hard for you to bring together, because there's so many different tools and systems that over time you've had, that management of those, training of those, and really the use of those coming together is really not even a question, because you can't, they're so disparate. So what we look at is a good mature organization that has a high FRI in terms of execution systems, has modular yet scalable, yet systemically integral, yet frugal, which is, they shouldn't be costing you arm and a leg to deploy this, templatized capabilities in these systems. So it's not that you have the system and that's a check. You might have systems, but they may be disparate and not integrated to get you the value, or you spend more time in inputting information in there rather than getting something out of it. So that's where you have to be able to identify the maturity. And I'm giving some food for thought in this 1 hour, because obviously it's not enough to, to have it all. But if I take a similar approach on, instead of execution, if we talk now about, say, maintenance, how are you managing your work instructions? How are you looking at your spare parts management? How are you doing, who is able to order? You have accreditation at different levels for people to be able to take that. Are you doing traceability or genealogy to know what to look to fix? Or if you go down a manufacturing process, if you go uphill, are you able to identify what point in time was that error, or what type of a gap might you have had, or your impact analysis or traceability is breaking? How do you do your root cause today? Is there handoffs between organizations that, or people or shifts that can identify success for you? And get to fixing the problem sooner, rather than spending a lot more time in actually identifying the problem. And that really is what a good FRI is, can tell you, that, look, you're spending a lot more time in the actions you take rather than getting to how to get the data to take the action. I'll also share one more. I think it's a very important element of the process, which is your continuous improvement process of programs. Most organizations today have looked at, sometimes doing Kaizen events that can really bring in a lot of the mind share or things that folks might be thinking about, but not being able to determine and run that across a systemic way. So running or having Kaizen events and both processes to capture and approvals and actually execute them becomes a mission and a process in itself, rather than the execution of that event or the outcome. So we really look at that maturity of organizations that are mature in that space. They really have digitized this capability, and they have traceability, they have ownership and accountability. They provide ability to have everybody sing from the same sheet of music. It's not a literal sheet because you're going to do it digitally, but you get the idea, hopefully. Now, while all of this is on the business systems and operational systems side for manufacturing, or function side, I should say, excuse me, there's an equal importance that our approach to determining the FRI gives to our customers, which is the industrial platform. And this I go a little bit dovetail into the IT side now of conversations. In the IT space, you look at many providers that have the ability to have a great industrial platform that's nimble, that's light, that does, many things that's promised of it. What you must look at from a maturity standpoint is IT also needs a good play in identifying, look, is this a technology we can provide scale to over time? Can I support my plant and my facilities? So when you look at world-class manufacturing, this is one key tenet in saying, are my systems scalable? Are they DevOps or continuous improvement on the IT side, or continuous development capable on the IT side? Do they provide the scalability of administration that can be deployed across multiple plants? And I'm reading this the bottom up as an example. Each of these blocks have many more sub bullets in them. My our intent of sharing this is that it's not just the business process that's important for you to look at, but then systemically, what kind of tool sets am I going to be successful with? And they must have these tenets that we've listed here. And what our approach is in determining the FRI is we give a score between that 1 and 3 or 1 and 5 to each of these and say, hey, you're great on connectivity, one of the providers that you've looked at from an IT assessment standpoint of industrial platform in this case. And we do that for many such technologies. But if you look at what the variety of data it can house, is it your sensors and your tags from your machines, or can it also bring in your core inventory data from the system of record? Can it bring warranty or complaints data from a system of engagement? Can it bring sales order from your CRM? So the variety of data that this platform can house becomes more and more important, because you're not just looking at OT data. It also has to culminate and integrate with big data, with data in your ERP systems, etc. Connectivity is a key play, mostly for OEMs, because most of the times when you're doing as a manufacturer of say a life sciences product, or in the pharma industry, or you're making a gadget, or you're in food and bev industry, you usually have PLCs and all your equipment is well connected in the plant network. But if you're an OEM that provides equipment for others to use over time, you certainly have things that you need to make sure. How are you connecting? Is it secure? What ports are you opening? What kind of control are you giving back and forth to systems? So understanding that is incredibly important. And so about data, about control, about the IoT infrastructure is what is another element of determination of your FRI. And this is our approach to doing that. So I mentioned about the systems or the functions of business, then the IT systems. And the third element, which is very important and often lost, it's the dynamism in which things are changing. So dynamic nature of the workforce. One of our customers that we were talking to, they were, having uh, youngsters out of college with a vocation in either mechanical or engineering, not necessarily an entire, say, college degree, but really looking at vocation-based hiring within 2-year degree program. And that workforce is not necessarily going to go through a 12, 15-week boot camp and only to understand. They might be gone by 16 weeks or 20 weeks into the job unless they're kept up with a lot of the technological advancement. So while it's not necessarily the factories or the GM's prerogative to really have the best systems necessarily for the workforce, but really it's the workforce and the way folks are adapted to today's economy, they may dictate as to how mature you need to be. So it's an important element of your maturity and kind of the reliability. So things that are otherwise seen as second to none in our day-to-day lives, especially, do I have systems that are, that have leaderboards and they're fun to deploy or use. I shouldn't say fun like you provide, the games on the factory floor, but the systems that are there, it cannot be the old school screens anymore. Even if they are, they have to be gamified a little bit. They have to have some inkling of that new age deployment capability for you to be successful. And a lot of these other scenarios, I don't want to go through each one, but your IT teams and your OT teams obviously care for each of these quite a bit. A lot of our customers want to start with an incredibly light footprint and not even have anything in their prem, which was the default norm in the past. But they want to be secure, but in a cloud that's privately managed by their team so that they can still be maintaining that reliability of data, yet scalability of systems when it comes to vertically adding more infrastructure. They want to really have something that's very quick to develop. It's inclusive of different personas and workflow that's integrated. So that's where agile development comes in, iterative development, joint application development comes into play. So this is another measure of what we do before we build the roadmap of, hey, you're standing at a 2 or a 1.5 in your maturity index across these 3 pillars. Now your programs, some are achievable easily, others you're going to have to spend a lot more time in achieving that. So again, taking your strategic vision, looking at where you stand within the process, technology, and org, and then coming up with an outcome of that, which is a roadmap. And that's what we really is the crux of our conversation today, which is we develop the roadmap of initiatives that really are not just your digital capabilities, but they are really the capabilities are your FRI maturity levels. That's what we really want to highlight here, that while we've written digital, but it's really where do you stand on the index of maturity for you to be managing your operations towards world-class manufacturing. So this is kind of a graph that I've put together with our teams from day 0 to 6 months, or you can take up to 2 years. Depends on what that timeline is for you. And the axis on the left is really the maturity that you have, how mature you are in terms of these things on the left. So you have IoT and multi-data ingestion and integration of multiple systems are kind of almost becoming table stakes, meaning you better have them available, whether you use it or not, but all IT systems or most of them have that promise at the least. So while this is determining your maturity, this is determining the timeline. What we help do is we put initiatives and programs in place to say, hey, look, I need to be able to do a good shift handover, which I don't do today. It's all manual. I don't have a logbook capture capability that's, but in Excel today. I OE monitoring that happens, but I'm doing a lot of manual maintenance of information. Can we digitize your plant utilization dashboard? These are, I put them as low-hanging fruits because they are things that you can do in fairly quick time with, I shouldn't say bare bones, but minimal maturity at times. So that's the way to look at it. Now, don't necessarily pay attention to these as your initiatives because you might have different maturity and readiness of systems. But important for you to know that there's methods like this available where that you can say, well, hey, if I want to be able to do CBM or prescriptive or predictive maintenance across equipment and across factories, if I want to be able to do energy monitoring and get my scope 1 and 2 identified at the least for my green and sustainability initiatives, what things do I need as maturity level? And then, of course, when you look at, I want to run self-driving robots or AGVs, or looking at mines, and I want to send drones out to look at assessing and assessing people or inventory at remote locations within a constraint of a large mine. That all obviously is possible, but the maturity of that is something you have to understand, and your reliability that you actually bring to bear, or we can help identify, is incredibly important in that case. So this view, of course, again, I take only the ops functions view, because this doesn't say include a lot of the logistics or transportation or inbound inventory, that type of stuff necessarily completely in account. These four things that I'm circling here are the functional tenets of your of your core operations of manufacturing. And in those, you identify, well, if I want to take a roadmap to become, an index of 2 to 3, what initiatives can I put on here? How much time might that take? How we build that with an organization? And of course, ITHENA helps organizations do that to improve their FRI so that they can go down the journey of world-class manufacturing. I want to show kind of one example of how have we helped an organization. It's a very simple example. Some of you might have seen it before, either through our social media marketing or what have you. Is the traditional Gemba walks, which is an M1 level of maturity in our index. This is what we did for this customer. We applied an FRI to continuous improvement area of this business, where today they had all safety, quality, people, delivery, cost, your SDQPC, reliability, all of them managed manually and either on whiteboards or printed paper, and then transferred those daily huddles, or a couple of times a day huddles, through photos to a computer. Now you would think that, well, that's a simple process that's been working. It takes me 5 minutes or takes half hour, whatever time I've said somebody to do. The challenge there is that when it comes to scale and the ability for you to do more with the resources, bandwidth that you have, you're stuck because now that same resource either is going to do that mundane process over and over again. And with the advent of technology, you've not really moved to anything that's digitized. And in many other cases, these things don't even convert. So the system of record becomes just a system because the record is lost. And then it takes an incredible amount of time for governance and tracking or tracing where an issue was in your quality or in your reliability or in an improvement program that you might have looked at. So what we have done is helped organizations become nimble by digitizing this process, which is you get the same outcomes of your monthly boards that you run, or weekly or daily boards for continuous improvement. You get your Kanban action items provided right within the interface, within a touch screen as an example. So imagine a 100 or 50, 60-inch TV as your as your as your whiteboard, where you're looking at various parameters and you're identifying what kind of initiatives you need to take on, and it's changing every few minutes as people are inputting data, or maybe it's reading data from your systems. So very powerful capability with the small change, both in mindset, organizational change management. That's why I said it's very important. And then, of course, looking at where your reliability or your index of maturity was, and how did you bring that forward with what initiatives in play. So this is a classic example of why you must assess where you are, identify what are the gaps in that technology, and then look at how you can build that to a like an M3, or assuming that's the maturity you want to identify for your success as a program, and then go down that path. I'm gonna ask our team to maybe open up for QA as well, and see if there's any questions, because this really is not a one size fits all, but the framework does fit most organizations. But the actual outcomes that I showed earlier on the chart obviously are many different. So it's to each their own, but the guiding factors are similar. So I'm going to pause and ask with my team to see if we've got any questions that are queued up, and if VP or Shweta, if you can let me know if there are questions that are there from our teams or from the audience. Okay, I see in the QA for me that there are some questions that you're posting. Okay, so one of the questions, it's a one-liner. It says, "How do we get started with this initiative?" So the best pragmatic approach is actually to get started, meaning identify what level of world-class manufacturing that you want to get to, which function and business in the in your operational capacity you want to look at targeting. And I'll kind of throw back that slide that we talked about in terms of the maturity, or in terms of the charter that you want to take on to start off with, and then that leads to the maturity example. So I would go back to this slide. This is an exercise we can help you immediately get to, which is help you understand. I'll just pull that slide up really quick out here. That what is that charter, and then looking at this process is what we would help you do within a workshop. That's kind of our offer as an output to this webinar, that will help you understand what areas of WCM that you want to get on, and you might have ideations, obviously. The other is then assess the maturity of your current processes that you have, and determine your readiness to take those on, and the reliability index that you must measure yourself with. And we'd like to identify then the programs with you, the solutions if you have any, and of course set through with some data points of how do you do that today with your organization, how do you identify that execution strategy. So and that's a key to get started, is to identify this block. And we have questionnaires, so with anybody that has an interest, we're going to send out a survey after this this event that help us do a workshop that we'll work with you jointly on to help understand where you are today on the far right of the slide, and then execute the middle portion to achieve the far left. There's another question that what is the estimated timeline for implementing FRI improvement program? And what are the milestones? What are the key milestones? Good question, because we didn't dwell into the details. We just said how we do it. Well, first, the maturity of where you are determines what to improve in it. So first, when we assess that and identify the gaps in where you are today and where your end state is, that determines the kind of the timeline for improving that maturity. But determining that maturity takes, I think, not even a few weeks worth of work, and it's not all inclusive, everybody on deck type of scenario. It's usually we have a little bit of a back and forth initially, and maybe a few meetings with your teams in identifying each of these areas, and questionnaires and best practices that we bring together, and saying, this is how somebody else is doing. Is this what you mean? Is this what you're thinking? And sometimes customers are incredibly clear. Other times they're wondering where it needs to stand. So we help identify that from your FRI assessment, and then the improvement comes in to say, well, you need to be at a 3 in these areas, but at least be a 2 in some of these other areas, and that ought to be okay for you to achieve what you want to achieve. The baseline is probably the very first outcome that we would give. I listed those 4 processes. That's some of the milestones, and milestones have 2 things: where you tell us how well you fit into that and agree to that, or 2, we say, listen, this is what we've seen on the outside. You better, hurry up and get to it. Now that's usually, a little bit more prescriptive approach, and organizations, depends on their nimbleness and how they move the weight around, and the teams can go either way. But for us to be able to determine the key milestones on assessment, there's a milestone of, hey, here's what we've assessed and here's the outcomes. So that's agreement on that is one milestone. The other is to be able to identify from here on the fulfillment of the gap. What is it going to take for us to go? How long it's going to take? So that's another outcome that we give as a milestone. So again, the baseline is going to be a very important achievement of a milestone to say we all agree that this is the baseline where we're at, and basis where we want to be. Here's the gap. So the 2 boxes in red is really what we're going to play around with to identify what are the must-haves, the good-to-haves, and what's the low-hanging fruit in that. And that, the graph I showed earlier as well, which was the maturity, we will help you build that readiness of the priorities that I showed earlier, that I'll resurface here for you to be able to take a look at as to how mature and how quickly can you get to that next phase of maturity. So if you see this particular graph, this is an important outcome, if I may, of our engagement with you. So it's important for you to know that. Now there's one more question I see. Can you talk about the tangible outcomes in factory performance, and how soon have you expected that with customers? Well, that's a loaded question because based on which program you pick out of this lot, assuming you've done the right prioritization with this example, I'll just show improvements in certain areas, like say digitizing Gemba walks, or digitizing logbooks, or providing a track and trace capability, or genealogy, or basic equipment CBM type programs. These 3 or 4, or actually the reporting, the production reporting, these 4 or 5 areas are incredibly, not to say easy, but they are easier with baseline is fairly low in my mind, or in our experience, to be able to achieve them, because you have to have a process and a integrated workflow to make this happen. So a lot of times IT maturity, the ability for an industrial platform that can ingest multitudes of data sets together, which is the bottom 3 levels of maturity, if you will, on the digital side. We help deploy these within 3 to 6 weeks. So can you see improvement in 3 to 6 weeks? Probably not, because you might see them over a course of a month or 3-month cycles to be able to see, hey, I've now digitized my Gemba walks. Suddenly 2 people in a month have a lot more time at their hand, and I want to be able to deploy those resources elsewhere. Or I can do quick traceability. I don't have to spend a whole week. I can do that within a few minutes because I have got this data digitized. So we've really done things within a few weeks, and I mean even 2 to 4 weeks. For example, the Gemba initiation and starting to use them within a few weeks, to something with predictive or prescriptive maintenance, or looking at RCA, or looking at implementing a track and trace or genealogy capability on the line, to few to several weeks. But the impact of that is seen right within, I would say, 90 days, at least at the productivity. Whether you've made that stride into world-class manufacturing, that's a journey. Like you said, your credit score doesn't just improve overnight. You take steps consistently, take them, and to be on the journey of a good Samaritan. So same way for going down the world-class manufacturing journey, you must make sure you take these steps consistently and with the right integration. So I'd love for any more questions. If the team can tell me if there's any more, I'll ask on our internal chat here. So we don't seem to have any questions any more questions in the Q&A, and we're right at the top of the hour. So with that, I want to really thank everyone for joining the webinar today and taking time on a Thursday to be with us. And I hope we can see you in the field, helping determine how you can get on the journey of your world-class manufacturing, and looking at improving, or at least baselining to start off with, your factory reliability index. And on behalf of ITHENA and our entire ecosystem of partners, I want to thank everybody for joining. And if there's any questions, please follow back up with us, or you'll get a survey from us, which we'll appreciate if you can fill out, so we can improve the quality and the matter of our content that we share. Thank you, and have a great rest of the day and the weekend.